Welcome to Reformed Thinking.
We are so glad to have you with us today.
Yeah, we have a really fascinating setup for you today. So imagine you are watching a tense, high-stakes thriller.
Oh, I love those kinds of movies.
Right. And the hero has just been violently betrayed. He is stripped of his identifying garments, and he is sold into slavery by his own flesh and blood.
It is a brutal scene to picture.
It really is. You are watching him bleed in the back of a Midianite caravan, and they are heading off into a foreign empire. The tension is just palpable.
You are sitting on the edge of your seat at that point.
Yes, and you turn the page, fully expecting to follow this young man down into the dark.
Yeah.
You want to see how he survives this agonizing trial.
That is the natural expectation for any story.
But suddenly, the author forces a jarring, violent camera cut.
The screen just shifts entirely.
It does. We are no longer looking at the victim in chains. The camera pivots, and we are zooming in on the villain.
The very brother who orchestrated the sale.
Yes, taking a casual, highly intentional stroll straight into enemy territory.
It is such a wild transition.
It is. And today, we are taking a deep dive into the source material that creates this staggering literary interruption.
We are looking at Genesis chapter 38, specifically the first 5 verses.
The camera has cut away from Joseph in chains, and it has settled squarely on Judah.
And we watch as Judah willfully walks away from his family.
He begins making a series of catastrophic life choices.
It really makes you ask a massive question.
Right. Why does Moses, the author, force us to look at Judah right here, right at this specific moment?
That abrupt narrative pivot is the central question.
It really frames everything we're going to talk about.
It does, and answering it gives us the mission for our deep dive into the source material today.
Moses is doing something highly calculated with this sudden structural shift.
He is. By placing Genesis 38 right here, the text forces us to analyze 3 monumental themes.
I know the first one has to do with how people fall away.
Yes. First, we are going to look at the mechanical anatomy of spiritual drift.
The text breaks down the precise sequential steps of how a person systematically detaches from the covenant community.
It is a step-by-step blueprint of failure.
What is the second theme we are looking at?
Second, we will examine the severe, concrete consequences of cultural assimilation.
We will see what happens when a believer decides to merge their household with the surrounding pagan society.
Their social alliances and their daily rhythms just completely fuse with the world.
It is terrifying to watch. And the third theme.
Third, we are going to observe the stunning reality of divine providence.
We will look at how God preserves a royal bloodline.
The very line that leads to Jesus Christ.
And he does it through severely flawed, rebellious people.
People who seem absolutely determined to annihilate their own heritage.
This narrative is not a dusty piece of ancient trivia for you to memorize.
No, it is a high-definition mirror held up to the human heart.
It demonstrates how sovereign grace operates by overruling human rebellion to accomplish redemption.
That is a great way to frame it.
Let's start with the physical landscape.
Geography is huge in this text.
It is, because the text immediately links Judah's geographical movement to his spiritual condition.
Genesis 38 verse 1 says, it happened at that time that Judah went down from his brothers
And turned aside to a certain Adullamite, whose name was Hirah.
Geographically, the phrase went down is a topographical fact.
The covenant family, Jacob and the patriarchs, are living up in the hill country of Hebron.
And Judah leaves those mountains.
He travels to the lowlands of Adullam, which is Canaanite territory.
But the author places this descent in direct parallel with Joseph.
Joseph is forced to go down to Egypt in chains.
He goes down into affliction.
But as we see later in chapter 39, he retains his faith under immense pressure.
Judah, by stark contrast, goes down in total freedom.
No external force compels him.
He voluntarily descends into Canaanite entanglement.
Now, I want to push back on this just a bit.
Go ahead.
Are we in danger of reading too much moral weight into ancient GPS directions?
That is a very fair question to ask.
Because going from the mountains to the foothills is just a basic physical reality.
Right, people move for all sorts of practical reasons.
Is there a concrete moral judgment embedded in the topography here?
There is a severe moral judgment embedded in that physical movement.
And you think the ancient audience would have caught that?
They would have recognized it instantly?
Because in biblical narrative, physical relocation routinely mirrors the spiritual posture of the heart.
To understand the weight of this, you have to look at the mechanics of what Hebron represented.
The family of Jacob, despite their intense and obvious dysfunctions, was the visible church on earth at that time.
They held the specific promises given to Abraham and Isaac.
They had the altars.
They maintained the oral traditions of God's redemptive plan.
When the text says Judah went down from his brothers, it means something massive.
He is severing himself from the only community on earth that possessed the oracles of God.
He is intentionally isolating himself from the means of grace.
Furthermore, the topography itself dictated the lifestyle.
Hebron was elevated, isolated, and pastoral.
It kept the family relatively insulated from the corrupt city-state politics of the valleys.
Adullam, down in the Shelah, or the foothills, was positioned along lucrative trade routes.
It was cosmopolitan, busy, and completely steeped in pagan culture.
Judah is retracing the tragic steps of the fallen human race.
Adam and Eve were cast out of the garden, moving east away from the presence of the Lord.
Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod.
Now Judah abandons the altars of Hebron to settle in the pagan lowlands.
He is choosing the proximity of the world over proximity to the people of God.
When you lay out the environmental contrast between the isolated pastoral life of Hebron and the bustling trade routes of Adullam, it changes everything.
It really changes how you view his departure.
You can almost picture him packing up his tents
Turning his back on his father Jacob.
and walking down into the valley specifically to chase a more integrated, lucrative lifestyle.
But the geography is just the first step.
The anatomy of his defection moves from where he goes to who he aligns himself with once he arrives.
The text specifies that he turned aside to a certain Adullamite, whose name was Hirah.
I want to look closely at the societal reality of Canaan in the patriarchal era.
This is roughly 1900 to 1800 BC.
The sources make it clear that this was not a neutral, secular marketplace.
The Canaanite religion was an agrarian fertility cult.
Their worship of Baal and Asherah was completely entangled with their local economy.
You could not separate their religious rites from their farming practices or their social contracts.
And the Hebrew verb used here, wayet, meaning turned aside, indicates a deliberate, formal pivot.
He is not just buying grain from Hirah.
He is making an alliance.
It makes me think of the concept of nitrogen narcosis in deep-sea diving.
Oh, that is an interesting parallel.
A diver goes too deep, and the pressure alters the nitrogen in their bloodstream.
They feel completely fine, even euphoric.
They don't realize their judgment is entirely compromised until they make a fatal error.
That happens so often with assimilation.
Judah thinks he's just making a smart business connection.
He is entirely unaware that the environment is intoxicating his spiritual judgment.
That nitrogen narcosis analogy captures the insidious nature of assimilation perfectly.
The diver does not feel the danger.
The danger feels like comfort.
In the ancient Near East, a formal relationship with someone like Hirah was not a casual friendship.
Hirah would have functioned as a legal witness.
A business sponsor and an entry point into the local Canaanite society.
You mentioned the fertility cults earlier.
We have to understand the mechanics of that system.
Canaanite religion was entirely transactional.
You performed specific, often highly immoral rituals to appease the local deities.
So they would bless your crops and your livestock.
By turning aside to Hirah, Judah is embedding himself in a socioeconomic system.
A system that requires participation in those pagan rhythms.
He is choosing a primary confidant whose entire worldview stands in direct opposition to the God of Abraham.
This raises a crucial point for you, the listener.
It is regarding how spiritual collapse actually functions.
The historical records and the text itself warn us.
A spiritual collapse almost never begins with a massive public scandal.
It begins quietly.
It begins with a subtle shift in the environments you normalize.
And the associations you cultivate.
Judah did not stand up one day and publicly denounce the God of his fathers.
He simply changed his zip code.
And then he changed his social circle.
Moses wrote this account for the Israelites wandering in the wilderness.
Right before they entered this exact same territory.
He wanted them to understand that assimilation happens by dropping your guard.
And making alliances with the surrounding culture.
The people you spend your time with will inevitably shape your affections.
That incremental slide is terrifying.
Because it feels so pragmatic in the moment.
You tell yourself you are just establishing a trade route.
You are just being a good neighbor.
Or you are just networking for your family's financial security.
But the loyalty of the heart shifts right under your nose.
And that shifting loyalty immediately produces the next catastrophic decision in this text.
We move from his business alliances to his choice of a spouse.
Verse 2 says, "There Judah saw the daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua.
He took her and went into her.
Here is where we need to look at the specific, rapid-fire structure of the narrative.
The verbs are completely stripped of any relational depth.
He saw, he took, and he went into her.
It reads like a corporate merger that skips the due diligence phase entirely.
And there is a glaring, intentional omission in the text.
This woman is left completely unnamed.
She is identified solely by her ethnicity as a Canaanite.
And by her father, Shua.
The omission of her name is a highly deliberate theological statement by the author.
It reduces the entire union to a transactional, site-based event.
This was not a careful, prayerful consideration of character.
Or shared values, or covenantal fidelity.
It was driven purely by physical impulse.
The specific sequence of verbs you're highlighted saw, took, went in functions as a deliberate echo.
An echo of the anatomy of temptation seen in previous biblical disasters.
Think back to the garden in Genesis 3.
Eve saw that the tree was good for food, and she took the fruit.
In Genesis 6, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were attractive.
And they took them as wives.
It is the lust of the eyes, leading directly to the immediate gratification of the flesh.
Bypassing all spiritual constraints.
To grasp the severity of this action, we have to look at the patriarchal mechanisms of marriage.
Marriage in the ancient Near East was the primary vehicle for preserving their religion.
And the identity of the tribe.
Think about the staggering lengths Abraham went to in order to secure a proper wife for Isaac.
He made his servants swear a binding oath,
Placing his hand under his thigh.
vowing not to take a wife from the local Canaanites,
The servant traveled hundreds of miles back to Paddan Aram.
just to find a woman from their own kindred,
Isaac and Rebekah employed the exact same mechanism with Jacob.
sending him away to ensure he did not marry a Hittite or a Canaanite.
They understood that the chosen line had to be insulated from pagan infiltration.
Judah completely ignores this bedrock theological boundary.
He trades the covenantal purity of his lineage for a single afternoon of visual appetite.
He tosses out generations of careful, strategic, faithful practice.
Because he sees something he wants right now.
But, as the text demonstrates, site-based, impulsive private choices immediately demand a public infrastructure.
A private compromise never stays in the bedroom.
It builds a house.
That brings us to the multiplication of compromise.
Focusing on the children and the domestic setting.
Verses 3 through 5 describe the births of 3 sons.
Onan, and Shelah.
But the text subtly shifts the mechanics of who holds authority in the home.
Verse 3 says Judah called the first son's name
But in verses 4 and 5, the grammar shifts to the Canaanite mother.
She called his name Onan.
And she called his name Shelah.
I look at this like structural engineering.
Specifically, the phenomenon of concrete cancer.
You can pour a beautiful concrete foundation.
But if water gets inside and rusts the internal steel rebar, the rebar expands.
And it shatters the concrete from the inside out.
On the outside, Judah's domestic situation looks successful.
He is having sons.
He is establishing a dynasty.
But the internal steel of his family's covenantal identity is rusting out completely.
The concrete cancer metaphor illustrates the hidden structural failure perfectly.
The shifting in the naming pattern is a massive signal to the ancient reader.
It signals the collapse of Judah's authority.
In a patriarchal, tribal society, the act of a father naming a child carried heavy sociological weight.
And legal weight as well.
It was the formal demonstration of headship.
It was the mechanism by which the father claimed the child for his specific lineage.
And his specific deity.
Judah names the first son,
Indicating he still retains a semblance of leadership at the beginning of the marriage.
But by the time the second and third sons arrive, the Canaanite mother takes over the naming rights.
This signifies Judah ceding his headship to the surrounding culture.
The Canaanite society he thought he could casually dabble in is now dictating the permanent identity of his offspring.
His initial private compromise in turning aside to Hirah has materialized.
Into a public, generational reality inside his own tents.
And the author provides one more chilling, highly specific detail at the end of verse 5.
It notes the specific geographical location where the third son, Shelah, was born.
A place called Chezib.
In Hebrew, the root of the word chezib means deception or lying.
The author includes this to make a definitive theological point.
Judah believes he is building a prosperous, lasting legacy.
But he's literally building it in the town of deception.
His entire household is a total illusion.
A ticking time bomb of dysfunction.
Which the rest of chapter 38 will graphically expose when divine judgment falls on his wicked sons.
So we have tracked the concrete steps of this defection.
We looked at the topography of his descent.
The socioeconomic alliance with a pagan witness,
The site-based impulsive marriage.
and the structural collapse of his household's identity.
But now we need to look under the hood of the text.
We need to examine the heavy theological machinery operating behind this grim history.
Applying a confessional lens grounded in Reformed systematic theology.
When we talk about Judah's sin, a common objection arises.
I hear this one a lot from readers.
A listener might say, wait a minute, the 10 Commandments have not been given yet?
Right, Moses has not gone up Mount Sinai.
There are no stone tablets.
How can we judge Judah so harshly for marrying a Canaanite when he did not have the written law in front of him?
That objection assumes that morality did not exist before Sinai.
Which represents a fundamental misunderstanding of how God's moral law functions.
The Westminster Confession of Faith, specifically chapter 19, deals extensively with the mechanics of the law of God.
It argues that the moral law was binding on human beings long before it was etched into stone.
Etched by the finger of God.
The moral law was written on the heart of mankind at creation.
It is the very fabric of human conscience.
Furthermore, the patriarchs operated under specific covenantal revelation.
As we discussed with Abraham and Isaac, the family possessed a crystal-clear oral tradition.
And a theological mandate that intermarrying with pagan nations was a direct violation of God's will.
A violation for the covenant line.
Judah was fully aware of this history.
He knew the strict parameters of his family's faith.
When he took a Canaanite wife, he violated the known moral law of the covenant community.
His actions were not innocent cultural adaptations.
Or a product of ignorance.
They were calculated acts of rebellion against the light he had received.
The text is laying out a clear, undeniable case of human depravity.
Proving that man, left to his own devices, will always choose the lowlands of sin.
I follow the logic on his personal culpability.
But here is where I really need to push back and challenge the broader theological framework.
Okay, let's hear it.
We know from the rest of the biblical narrative that God had already decreed something massive.
The royal line, the messianic line leading to Jesus, would come through Judah.
Jacob prophesies later in Genesis 49 that the scepter will not depart from Judah.
So if God eternally planned for the Savior to come through Judah's specific lineage, does that mean God approves of Judah's sin?
Does Judah get a theological free pass because his descent into Adullam was necessary to produce the required offspring?
Or worse, did God actively force Judah to turn aside to Hirah and marry a Canaanite so that the timeline would play out according to the script?
You are hitting on the heavy tension between human responsibility and divine sovereignty.
And we have to steer through this with incredible precision.
The Westminster Confession provides vital clarity here in chapters 3 and 5.
Which deal with God's eternal decree and the mechanics of his providence.
The doctrine states that God from all eternity did freely and unchangeably ordain whatsoever comes to pass.
However, the confession immediately adds a crucial qualifier.
He does so in such a way that he is not the author of sin.
Nor is violence offered to the will of the creatures.
We are talking about the mechanics of primary and secondary causes.
God is the primary cause, ordaining the grand end of redemption.
But he works through secondary causes, human choices.
God bounds, orders, and governs human sin to achieve his righteous ends.
But the sinfulness of the action proceeds entirely from the creature.
God did not inject lust into Judah's heart.
God did not coerce Judah into leaving Hebron.
Nor did he force him to bypass the covenantal marriage boundaries.
Judah acted entirely out of his own free agency.
Driven strictly by his own corrupt, site-based desires.
Therefore, he is fully 100% culpable for his defection.
Yet, God's sovereignty is math enough.
And his providence is intricate enough.
To take Judah's wicked, autonomous choices and overrule them for the sake of preserving the messianic line.
God does not approve of this sin.
He hates it.
But he uses the chaotic wreckage caused by the sinner to construct a history of redemption.
Human unworthiness cannot overturn God's sovereign purpose.
God works through the mess without ever endorsing the mess.
The distinction between primary and secondary causes is incredibly helpful.
It maintains God's complete control without making him the author of evil.
So how does this heavy theological reality apply to you, the listener?
How do we use this text today?
We can look at this through the framework of the two uses of the moral law.
The first use of the law is designed to function like an MRI machine.
An MRI doesn't cure a tumor.
It just gives you a high-definition, undeniable picture of the fact that you have one.
It crushes self-righteousness.
When you read about Judah, a patriarch who personally witnessed the miracles of God's providence in his father's life falling so rapidly into worldliness, The law operates as an MRI on your own heart.
If a man who walked with Jacob can abandon the faith for a Canaanite trade route, it forces you to admit how easily you can be bought.
It absolutely destroys any illusion of native moral superiority.
The MRI analogy is spot on.
The first use of the law strips away our defenses
Drives us to despair of our own native strength.
and points us to our desperate need for an external savior,
But the text also applies the third use of the law.
which functions as a guide for the believer's daily life.
Once a person is saved by grace, the law shows them how to live a life of gratitude that aligns with God's design.
The third use echoes the practical command of Romans 12.
Do not be conformed to the pattern of this world.
This Genesis text stands as a severe warning.
To audit your domestic choices, your business alliances, and the environments you willingly enter.
You are called to remain distinct
The law guides us to reject the sight-based, impulse-driven living of Canaan.
and to embrace the faith-based, covenantal living of Hebron,
You are commanded to guard your household.
and to be highly vigilant against the subtle nitrogen narcosis slide of cultural assimilation.
The law dictates that your daily choices carry heavy generational weight.
That generational weight is palpable throughout this entire chapter.
But thankfully, the narrative does not permanently stall out in the town of deception.
It drives us directly toward the Christological horizon.
We have to answer the biggest question of all.
How does this dark, compromised, messy history point directly to the mechanics of the gospel and to Jesus Christ?
When we look at the New Testament, specifically the Gospel of Matthew, we see something stunning.
Matthew chapter 1 provides the official legal genealogy of Jesus Christ.
And right there in verse 3, Matthew proudly and explicitly includes Judah.
Tamar and the offspring of this incredibly chaotic, sinful period.
It broadcasts this failure on the very first page of the New Testament.
I have to ask, if the royal lineage is supposed to be a hall of famer, a polished list of the best and brightest to prove the king's pedigree, why doesn't God edit this chapter out?
Why put Judah's catastrophic defection right in the preamble to the gospel?
God includes it precisely because this is not a genealogy of human merit.
It is a genealogy of divine grace.
If the mechanics of justification relied on human works or covenantal perfection, Judah would have been disqualified.
He would have been cast off forever the moment he went down to Adullam.
His prominent presence in the Messianic line proves that justification is by faith alone.
And relies entirely on imputed righteousness.
God includes Judah to shout to the universe that the Savior came to rescue flawed, rebellious sinners.
Christ intentionally entered a human lineage deeply scarred by scandal, idolatry, and moral collapse.
In order to redeem a people marked by scandal, idolatry, and moral collapse.
To see the true Christological weight of this text, we have to draw the sharp, mechanical contrast between Judah and Jesus.
Look at the direction of their movements.
Judah went down from the heights of Hebron into the lowlands of sin.
Severing his relationship with his brothers to pursue his own lusts.
Christ came down from the heights of heaven in the incarnation.
Stepping directly into our fallen, toxic world, yet remaining entirely without sin.
Judah saw a woman and took her to satisfy his own selfish appetite.
Christ saw our lost, ruined condition and took upon himself our frail human nature in order to sacrifice himself for us.
Judah failed completely in his role as a patriarch, a head of household, and a leader.
Jesus is the true, faithful prophet, priest, and king that Judah failed to be.
Jesus is the true Lion of the tribe of Judah.
The one who overcomes the temptations of the world rather than capitulating to them.
Judah's descent only serves to magnify Christ's descent.
One descends to gratify the flesh.
The other descends to redeem the lost.
As we bring all these themes together into a final synthesis, we have to look directly at what this means for you.
The text warns us against trading the holiness of God for the nobility of the world.
Hirah was an Adullamite noble, a man of status and wealth.
But his nobility was pagan.
Judah wanted that status, that ease, that financial integration.
But the text proves that spiritual drift is a quiet killer.
It does not announce itself with a trumpet blast.
The people you turn aside to will shape you.
Your associations dictate your affections.
And the private choices you make, the impulsive things you do when you think you are just managing your own life, eventually become the concrete realities your family has to live inside.
A father's private compromise inevitably becomes a son's public environment.
That is the sober, severe warning of the text.
But we also have to speak to the massive comfort it provides.
For anyone listening right now who looks at their own family history and sees nothing but disorder, impurity, brokenness, or generational sin.
You might feel like you were born in the town of Chizib.
You might feel surrounded by deception and structural failure.
This text is in your Bible to prove that God's grace operates on a scale infinitely larger than human wreckage.
God is not intimidated by the rusted rebar of your family's messy history.
He specializes in bringing life out of moral death.
His providence can take the shattered pieces of a compromised lineage and use them to construct his redemptive purposes.
Your past does not frustrate the mechanics of divine grace.
It provides the very contrast needed to display his mercy.
Christ was born out of a messy family tree, specifically so that he could save people trapped in messy family trees.
He redeems the wreckage.
As we close this deep dive into the source material, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over on your own.
It builds on the historical context we have laid out, but it places the tension directly in your lap.
The original audience hearing this story from Moses were the Israelites in the wilderness,
They were standing right on the edge of the Promised Land.
looking across the Jordan River, preparing to march into the exact same Canaanite territory that Judah walked into centuries earlier.
Here's the thought to wrestle with.
If Judah, the mighty patriarch, the forefather of the royal tribe, a man who lived with the immediate covenant family, could not handle a casual stroll down into Canaanite culture without being entirely swallowed by its economic systems, its fertility cults, and its marriage practices.
What hope did the Israelites have entering that same land?
And more importantly, what hope do you have living your daily life in a modern world that is constantly engineering new ways to assimilate you?
Their survival and your survival relies entirely on the exact same sovereign grace that preserved Judah.
Without the intervening imputed righteousness of the true Lion of Judah, we all go down.
We all turn aside.
The only thing keeping you from settling permanently in the lowlands of Adullam is the firm grip of a faithful Savior.